Mathew TazMo Taylor has been with Team Envy's venture into Overwatch almost since the very beginning. Starting out as an esports fan and competitor, showing up to as many events as possible during the Call of Duty MLG days, he eventually became the manager of the European powerhouse team formerly known as IDDQD, that Envy had signed under their banner when INTERNETHULK asked during a team dinner if TazMo could also take over the managerial duties for the Overwatch team on top of looking after the COD squad. The aftermath is quite literally esports history. From going on a straight win streak of 57 matches in North America and winning OGN's Apex Season 1 as the first Western team to ever win a major esports competition in South Korea, TazMo has been there with the team to experience it all. However, when the Overwatch League started with well-deserved high expectations for the organization, the fuel fell from grace, finishing outside the playoff seats in the inaugural season. In this interview with GGRecon, TazMo reflects on the experiences as we discuss the events and happenings during the early stages of Overwatch esports. Talking about topics like taking in the highest highs, INTERNETHULK's impact on the team and esports at large, the expectations coming into the first season of Overwatch League, the vanishing of Chipshajen, working with XQC, Envy's values as an organization, and Hastro's involvement in the Overwatch team. We hope you will enjoy this injection of pure nostalgia and reminiscence as we give you Mathew TazMo Taylor. Yiska here with another GGRecon interview, this time of course with TazMo, General Manager of the Dallas Fuel. And you have been in that role, I would say, okay, the descriptions of jobs in esports, and specifically in the Overwatch League, and specifically for the general manager role, is sort of ambiguous. Like, you can't really ever tell to the full degree what people are actually doing. Some general managers are very economically minded, do the marketing stuff. Some are super team focused and manage the day-to-day there. So what does the general manager of the Dallas Fuel do on a daily basis?
Yeah, so that's a question I've gotten a lot. You know, a lot of people are curious because, like you said, in esports, it's very ambiguous and it's very different, especially going into the league. But I think a lot of it is very much competitive minded, you know, and you know, day to day with the team specifically. You know, always having an understanding and a connection with like the marketing aspect and like the business aspect, working with Mike, Hastro, and the league. I think that's a big thing for me. And just, you know, kind of always trying to see what our team can do to help our organization grow as a whole with Envy. But also, like, the first and foremost thing is like the competitive side, working with whoever coaches or players we have and doing my best job to really make them feel as comfortable as possible, make sure they're just fully able to focus on the game and the game only. It's like the main drive for me to make sure we're trying to do the best we can.
Right. And I think a lot of people, especially that are looking at management jobs, would love to hear a story how someone gets there. So let's start at step one, right?
Yep.
So how did you get into esports and how did that develop into a job in Overwatch specifically?
Sure. Yeah. So I was, you know, I my love for gaming never. I started like as soon as I was able to get a computer or a console. Actually, it was quite a big console gamer at the start because I just never had an access to a PC. Just my family wouldn't let me get one, and console was a little cheaper at the time, and whatnot. And then from there, you know, I constantly played lots of FPSs. Call of Duty being one of the biggest ones for me, and you know, I was pretty good. I wouldn't consider myself ever at the pro level, but I did compete in like some actual like official tournaments from like MLG and whatnot like that. But I kind of got to a point where I noticed like the whole esports scene was a real thing, and like I understood, oh, these guys are competing all over the place, and I kind of saw I think it was Modern Warfare 2 and Envious were playing at the time in a game, and I just saw that, and you know, I play Call of Duty and I see these guys play and they're insanely good and talented. And I noticed that they host these events just live in, you know, cities that I knew of, like one being Dallas. So MLG Dallas was the very first, funnily enough, was the very first event I went to. And kind of, you know, fell in love with it right away. You know, like Call of Duty events or something else. If you've never been to one, they're definitely explosive and a lot of words used for sure in those matches. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to watch, and I just kind of fell in love with it after that. And I just really want to get my foot in there. And I realized like I'm good at games, but I saw these guys like, okay, these guys are a lot better than me. To the point, I was like, I still really want to get a part of it. And I was studying in college at the time. I was doing marketing, management degree. I was also studying meteorology. I didn't know what I was really wanting to do at the time, and I just kind of made my way into working with MV. I kind of moseyed my way in through like some content creation at the time. Just tried to do whatever I could, get my name out there. I started showing up to every event possible, just driving, flying, wherever I could, and Hastro kind of gave me an opportunity to just kind of be like a glorified water boy in a sense of like going to these events, helping out the team any way I could. And that was just like the very bare minimum. But yeah, I would just pay my own way and do what I could. And then I just got the opportunity one day. Mike hit me up. He said, do you want to just move out to North Carolina, where we're based at the time? And do you want to just pack your bags, come over here, and you can stay at our team house. We'll pay you a little small salary. Basically enough to live on, basically. And if you want to take because back then it wasn't what it is today.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what, I'm going to do it. I told my parents, I told everybody else that I was around, and I said, I'm just going to go do this. Took the 18-hour drive from Texas to there, and yeah, I started just working my way up, learning a lot from Mike, and someone who's like an unsung hero, which not many people know of, is Graham Henry, who's basically our VP of player ops, and he is like kind of working right under Mike and me, or right under Mike, who's just kind of helping everybody with every single team. Mm-hmm. So I don't envy his job, no pun intended, because that guy works really, really hard. So shout out to him. I think he's super underappreciated. But yeah, so learning a lot through the Call of Duty scene mainly at the time. And I started just being a team manager there, and then basically an overall manager for the team. Big highlights for me were 2016 when we won the World Championship for the Call of Duty League. This is before the CDL was a thing, but it was the major. And, went in next year, got second place. So had some really good success with the Call of Duty team. And then Overwatch kind of came out, right? And Overwatch came out, and we kind of went from there. And then, I at one point I was working with both Overwatch and COD, and then Overwatch League came in, and I had to kind of pick a side in a sense. And, I wanted to, spread my wings a bit and really focus on Overwatch.
Did you have the choice between Call of Duty and Overwatch then?
Yeah, actually, I would say so. I mean, obviously, at the time, knowing that the league, so when Overwatch was going on, the way I got the Overwatch job basically is I was still at the team house working with whoever. The Call of Duty team wasn't always there. Like one or two players would be there here and there, but it was never like the full team, just due to like, maybe their parents or whatever, at the time. And then once the IDDQD roster came over, with Dennis and INTERNETHULK and the rest of them, they all just kind of came over to the house. This band of Europeans and Tailspin just came in, invaded our home basically, and I was helping them out, getting them acclimatized to just living in the US and everything else. And like maybe like a couple weeks into that into their season, INTERNETHULK basically talked to Hastro one time at dinner. It's like, can he be our manager as well? Can he manage us too? And Stro just looked at me, was like, do you want to? I was like, yeah, I can do both. Yeah. So I just managed both teams for a while, and it only got a bit more tricky once we started traveling a lot more for Korea and Apex. And once the Overwatch League was like, okay, you guys need to be in LA, you need to do all this stuff, I was just like, well, I got to like fully focus on one thing here, and I still don't look back. I'm really happy with Overwatch, and it's been a great experience so far. Even if we had a couple of rough seasons, I've always loved Overwatch ever since I kind of saw it. Do
you play yourself?
Yeah. It's funny. I'm a GM who almost made GM. Okay. That was the funny thing. I'm not. So I'd like to say, like I said, I'm pretty good at most games. Like I played Counter-Strike for a while. I got like to Supreme when I was playing quite frequently. I'm someone who likes to kind of flip-flop on games. Like one month I'll be playing a lot of CSGO, then I'll play a lot of League of Legends. So I never really like super dedicated. But Overwatch was one of those games, and Call of Duty, of course, when I played it, that kind of stood out to me, and I played a lot. Like I still play now. My highest SR, because I know people like to know that, was 3989.
Nice. Which
so
role?
I was literally that at the time. Well, at the time that wasn't DPS. That was. I think I was playing tank at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I was kind of flexible. I like playing all roles. Honestly, it's always been a fun thing to do for me. Obviously, DPS is a lot of fun, depending on the meta specifically. I always liked to play Genji, but it never worked out. I was always trying. Maybe I'll get some tips to Sparkle or something. But no, yeah, I still play a lot. I would like to say like 30, 40 games a season at least. Right now I'm only Diamond, unfortunately. I kind of dropped down a bit, but we'll try and get that up more. But I like to stay in touch with the game a lot. Like I really try and do my research and keep up with the game I'm a part of and invest in. But Overwatch is a great game to play, especially when you're doing very well in solo queue. So I only solo queue almost always, unless Hastra wants to play with me and I have to carry him. No, I'm just kidding. Mostly solo queue. It's very rewarding. The game Overwatch, in my opinion, is very rewarding. It's especially if you get in as a solo queue player in a 6v6 game, which is very complex, a lot of things going on, and you're just playing solo queue, and the team just kind of meshes, the communication's on point, and you just win a game, and it was a hard-fought game. It's one of the best feelings I've ever had in gaming, in my opinion. I mean, there's other games that I've done really well, but it's just a really fun thing. And I think it's also because since I watch scrims every day. I watch these guys play every single day.
Right.
So I'm so used to listening to that communication. It's ingrained in my head, and I can't expect that. But when that does happen sometimes, where people are calling out and really like intense about winning, yeah, it's a great feeling. So
right,
still playing.
Now, communication, of course, got a little bit harder this season, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And like I think a lot of fans are wondering, like, how does the communication go? Does that go through a translator most of the time, or like how are you guys set up in order to make sure like everything is understood and like shared across companies stuff, and like also for you, of course, you gotta have that information as well, right?
Yeah. So I mean, throughout even all of our seasons, since we, obviously once we had the original Envy roster, we didn't really need, everyone had pretty good English, so we never really needed a translator for any of those things. Maybe for Harry, because Harry sometimes just had a real thick Spanish accent. That guy, he just was so lazy with his English. And like I honestly, it's funny. In season 1, I got him English lessons because I was like, Harry, you're too like his speech sometimes was needing it, and it was funny, but it didn't help. So he just, he was caught in his ways. So. No, but look, we always, throughout all the seasons that we've had, like a Korean player, for instance, which has been the main language barrier, we've always had someone there to try and help with that translating. Even in season 1, we had Violet, who was, basically our team manager at the time, working with me to kind of help with the translation side of things like that. And then we would always offer English lessons because we really want to push the fact that if you're in a multi language team, and English is the main language, you don't want to necessarily use the translator too much as a crutch almost. You don't want it too because you can't do that in game, right? You can't have a translator in game unless you have someone that's like maybe like an OG or something nowadays who has really good English versus So we want to have that opportunity for them to use a translator, but also to learn English as much as we can. We had that since season 1 with Sophie, and even now we brought in Helen or Deer. She started off as a translator and now is our assistant GM because she's helping me a lot with a lot of these things going through the first year of season 3 and now into season 4. And she's been great. And I'm always in communication with these guys as much as I can be. Like I send them, DMs on Discord. I talk to them. If they're like long drawn out conversations that may be a bit hard to understand or something, I'll have Helen help me translate. But I always want to try and talk to these guys when I can, like pull some jokes. And I think it's important. And I am also learning Korean. I'm trying to really trying to understand and, living in Korea for 6 months from Apex days, like all these things combined, it's important. You got to care about your craft, and having a full Korean roster is it's a change, but it's a welcome change, and I'm excited for it.
Is anyone on the team taking English lessons?
Yeah, a few actually are. We basically are offering it to anybody. Any of the players or coaches. I know, for instance, last year, Young and Doha both did. for now. And then I know Jexe and Repel are also doing English lessons for it now. So it's open to all of them. And for the most part, I think honestly they have not bad English. From who I've been talking to. So I'm trying to learn off them. They're going to learn off me. Once they're all here, they're going to be loud. I've been telling my whole company, I was like, you guys don't know real esports until you have a bunch of guys in Overwatch screaming at the top of the lungs. And then you have someone like Sparkle. And now Doha's back reunited with him because Doha is hilarious because he was super loud. He'd just be screaming at like 8 p.m. after our scrims are over in the office, just yelling. And now obviously we have Sparkle. So yeah, I think their English is good, but also I want them to feel comfortable in talking Korean and all these things. And hopefully I can learn more from them.
Right. Now, okay, let's unroll this entire Envy thing because you are one of the most seasoned brands in I think by a couple of weeks, probably the most seasoned brand.
Sure, yeah.
Before Misfits, before C9 got in, you guys had an initial team. Now, I still feel after all these years, your values have stayed the same in the sense that to me, from the outside, Envy feels like an org I expect to be run by someone that has played competitively, that sets like competitive goals as one of the priorities, and also usually does right by players in that regard, right? So overall speaking, you guys almost came into Overwatch full speed and hired, I think, like from the Ghost of Gamers weekly results at the time, possibly the best squad in the world, right? Of course, keep in mind, that was still beta. I think it was at around the time. Korea wasn't playing yet, like the access was limited. But the team actually had quite a couple of interesting personalities that might be names for you guys or for people who are Overwatch fans now. Of course, Tailspin was on that team. Cool Matt, who's now the general manager for Houston Outlaws. Stoop was the one of the coaches for the Valiant for a while, and then I think 3 other players who also all played before together. Other than I think one of them was an addition at the time. I remember specifically that there was an article written about them called the Dead Game Gods because, like, in several games they would just come in, and I think they had a ridiculous record in those games, just like taking the $500 cash prize pool every week, and then they come into Overwatch and they dominate almost immediately. Of course, there was healthy competition. People will remember, for instance, those that were around at the time. Seagull had a team that was competing against them.
What was it? Google Me as well was one of the
Google Me was
Mix Up, I think, was another one.
Mix Up was the Seagull team with and then Google Me became C9 later, right?
C9, yep.
But still, like, that roster, and at the time, I'm pretty sure Coolman was the DPS still, right?
Yep.
I remember him from his Cree, So. Was it always the goal for Envious to come in and like always do competitively well?
Yeah, I mean, regarding Hubris, I think that was the name before joining Envy, and it was funny because after we made the swap to the IDDQD roster, they made the team again, and they call it Nubris. I don't know if you recall that, and I loved that. I thought that was hilarious. That and Google Me, I love the name Google Me was funny too. But yeah, I mean, I think any esport Envy's always try to get into, we always trying and really look to have a championship caliber team, or at least a team that is working towards that goal, right? I mean, like you said before, this is an organization owned and managed by a former pro player in Hastro, right? And he's been there from the get-go, and he's always wanting to be competitive. I mean, going into Overwatch, when we saw them, we knew they were one of the top teams in NA, and if not the world, and they were dominating and looking so good. And that was it's always still been the idea, right? I mean, it doesn't always work. It's not always been. But you're not always going to work that out. And sometimes, maybe you put too much trust in something that's going to work, and maybe it takes too long, and you could have had another opportunity here or there. But I mean, I think especially around the early days, we really took a plunge into, and we were one of the first major orgs to really jump into the scene, right? As well, which we really believed in the game, and what it could become. So yeah, I mean, I think that's always kind of been that, and then going into like noticing that IDDQD roster and then adding Tailspin was another kind of jump because we already had a pretty decent team, but it just like this was like, okay, these guys are insane, and then we picked those guys up and got them all visas and moved them out to North Carolina as soon as we could. So
yeah, and then of course like North America claimed them as a North American team almost immediately and said like we're the best region now.
Hey, we had Tailspin. It's fine. It counted, you know. That was about it. But it was a funny time because you know, we were a North American org with a pretty much European team. But yeah, we'll take that. You know,
like it seemed like for the time. I mean, I'm sure at the time like talks are already in motion. Like that. Something big is coming. You kind of want have a good team. You know that Apex like might be something that you guys can be participating in. But still, for the development of the scene, it seemed quite heavily invested into it to just fly out and like provide a life for some European players that were also like ended up being ridiculously good, but. Like, were you guys always like going to go heavy into Overwatch? Were you believers in the game?
I think me personally, I love the game. That's one of the reasons, you know, I flipped over. And I mean, not to say I don't still love Call of Duty. It's still very, you know, warm my heart, and I love the game as well. And I'm glad the team's still doing really well. But Mike also, Hastro, he was, you know, he loved the game. He started playing it, and he still plays a ton. You know, he still loves playing the game, and yeah, he plays it quite often.
How high?
He's not as high. I'll let him say it. He's not as high as me. He's like plat. He's plat almost.
Okay.
I think he's diamond actually in a few roles in seasons. So but he plays often and he solo queues, and he's been playing a lot of tank rate recently.
Okay.
You know, getting older, I guess. Nah, he's gonna hate me now. Yeah, but like Castro, like immediately believed in it, and being an Activision Blizzard game, and you know, seeing some of the other things that came up, and he was a big, you know, Blizzard fan. You know, he played countless years of Diablo and stuff, and all these other games. May not be, you know, and obviously you got World of Warcraft and these other games as well. But like, I don't know, it just sprung to us like, okay, this looks really cool. This looks really good. Looks really fun. It looks like it's gonna have a really good community going on, and like just the idea of it. And you know, we jumped on it, and you know, it could have flopped on its face, and we could have just picked up this team, gotten visas for nothing. But I mean, you got to take those risks sometimes, and sometimes they pay off, sometimes they don't. But I always think, you know, we try and be active on making, you know, things that we believe in work as best as we can.
Right. Now, when you signed that team, I remember at the time there were some cheating accusations against some of the players. Taimou being the big one, but also I remember like just faintly like a clip of INTERNETHULK on McCree, just like his crosshair just jumping towards the spawn.
Yeah.
Keep in mind,
like,
this
McCree
is
or Widow, and I think Gibraltar, and I was just like so confused because I was like, I've seen he plays Winston for a reason, you know, like the guy didn't have. I love the guy, but his aim was never something. Like I remember Taimou calling him no brain, no aim, or no
Winston,
no brain, no aim. He just did both because he just troll him. So yeah.
No, like and of course, like a lot could just be explained with bugs, early bugs in the Overwatch beta.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, Taimou's aim was otherworldly at the time, right? Like I still firmly believe, like around the like pre-Apex, Apex Season 1, even Apex Season 2, he was probably the most gifted aimer in that scene. And we already had pretty much all the greats, or a lot of them that we consider to be amazing. They were already playing at the time. So, okay, you get this guy into the facility. Do you look over his shoulder and go like, okay, let's check if this is legit or if he's installing anything? Like,
yeah. So obviously we saw the accusations on him, and you know, we keep track of all that all the time, and that's never been something we'd stand for in a player. We wouldn't want them representing our team. And you know, as we signed him, we basically talked to Taimou before he came in, and we were basically like, hey, you know, we see all this stuff, like all these clips, and me and Hastro saw these clips, and like we play the game too, and we're like, wow, these are nuts. And like you said, could be some bugs in the game and some other things, but it did. We were like, all right, maybe he could be cheating, you know, because it does look so believable in a sense of how crazy some of his flicks and clicks were, you know. But you as soon as he came in to the team house, we had him sit down on our PC, on our mouse and keyboard and everything, and we just said, sit down and play. And we just sat there and watched him play ranked and some other games and stuff and scrims for the first couple of days. And he was still clicking heads. There was no change. He has an erratic type of aim. He's always been that way. He's, he just has a kind of cockiness about him and the way he shoots and everything. He's always done that. Even now when he's playing Valorant, I've noticed it. And it's just, that's how he plays. And he still has an amazing kind of God's gift to aim for him. And he showed it time and time again in these lands against, the best competition in Apex. I still remember when he kind of dumpstered Carpe in that BK Stars Envy match. Like, some of those are still historic moments. And shout out to the Apex guys. I love those cams when Carpe got beaten. He gets shot by Taimou, and then Carpe's sitting there. I can't remember what his teammate was. He was like, "You're okay. It's all right." So definitely, we always want to make sure, but we're glad obviously it wasn't. And he's, known as one of the craziest hit scan players of all time, I still think. And he had a hugely dominant performance when he came to NA and kept doing it even in Korea. So.
Yeah, I remember sitting with Baroy, who's now coached with Boston Uprising, and Nuki, the GM from Spitfire, before she was even involved. And we were basically watching his matches and going oh, he's hitting the record button again. Because sometimes, Taimou just had that mode where you could legitimately fire up OBS, upload, and that would be an incredible frag movie over a map, right? Not just on Widow. I think his Roadhog for a while was ridiculous as well. So you guys had a win streak at one point of 57 matches, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone talks to me about how Overwatch is a game of confidence, and the more you win, the easier winning is and whatnot. But the more you lose, losing is feels really bad. So, what does it feel like to be invincible over months on end until Rogue came along and then had a rival?
Yeah. I mean, it was crazy because I remember, Cloud9 had some really close matches with us a lot of times. And I remember when we kind of came over in some of those Alienware monthly melees, they went game 5, but it seemed like we almost eventually downloaded them and then just it didn't matter anymore. And it was crazy because, we've been in, I've been in teams where we've won championships and looked really good and had a dominant tournament. But the fact is, they were just dominant for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. It wasn't even close. And these games, I didn't even have to watch them and know we were going to win it. And obviously I did, but it was almost like a blur. And I don't think that will ever be really repeated in that sort of sense again, especially in Overwatch with how competitive the season's going to be each year and after that. But I mean, the closest you have is someone like the Shock, but even that, they looked like they, were beatable and got beaten a few times, But back then it was just different. And the guys were having fun. They were just joking around, having fun with it. People would play off roles. I still remember back in the old days before the hero limit and the notorious diva stall on Hanamura. I don't know if you've ever seen that one where they just constantly pulled out divas, and they always just had fun. And I think you're very right in the fact that it's a very momentum-based game. And I think you could say that for a lot of esports, but I think in Overwatch as well, with how fast-paced it is and how everything's going, it's like when you're winning, and you're going to continue to win for a very long time until something stops you. And I think Rogue were definitely that sort of team, and they were the other team that was kind of they were training all their life to kind of take us down at Gamescom. And it was a fun feeling, but I think what was more important was after we lost, that we were able to come back and then beat them again in Apex Season 1 and then kind of reclaim our throne in a sense.
Yeah, and I think in from today's scope, I think the context isn't really immediately apparent how meaningful your victory at Apex Season 1 was. Because old esports heads will remember you probably, if Korea really cared about a game, you're probably not winning in it. In fact, nobody had ever won a team-based game against a Korean team at that time. I vividly remember, Monty just going crazy about the fact that you guys were legitimately the first Western esports team to go into Korea, and also, the context needs to be given, and feel free to stoneface this one, but playing in Korea means you're playing to a degree also against Korea. Meaning, if you're scrimming, you cannot necessarily expect that your strategies will be held like secret. Players talk, right? So it's also a pride thing. So in that regard, the achievement to win Apex Season 1 cannot be understated. But I will say, like, were you coming into it and thinking, okay, we are either the favorites or we're definitely going to win it? Because for a while, it didn't look like it would happen.
So, honestly, I mean, myself and Dennis talked about this a lot. INTERNETHULK, he's always been a vivid, like, supporter of like Korean esports. Like, his dream was to go compete in Korea, and he finally did that, and that was like a huge thing for him. And to win was even, the icing on the cake. So he knew, like, coming into it, like, this isn't going to be any walk in the park. Like, we're a very strong team, and I knew it too. Is like, yeah, there's, I've watched countless League of Legends worlds and tournaments, and it just was never even close at the time, right? And the infrastructure they have there, and like you said, it's like, there's so much pride in Korea that you don't want a team from from anywhere else to win, right? And even when we got there, every team wanted to play us. Every team wanted to play us. Like, every team was hitting us up, and it was like, we're situated and we're playing, and we had a lot of support and a lot of fun, and like people were like, oh my god, Taimou, it's very nice to meet you, all this stuff, it's cool. But at the same time, like, these scrims were a lot more competitive than they were ever before, and like the meta definitely helped us, because I think Korean Dive and the way they played the game with, like, the Winston players especially were just so much better overall than the West especially. And it did help that we had Taimou on Roadhog, and he was just the only person that even came close. I thought was, like, I mean, everybody says Evermore and all that stuff, but I'm telling you, Birdring.
Yeah.
In that Kongdu Insia match, watching that back, he destroyed us on Roadhog. Like, I still remember that, and it's crazy now looking back. Like, that Birdring, he's still going, and he was. I still think that Uncia team was stronger than the Panthera team by a fair amount.
Mm-hmm.
And beating them was, I think, the big one. Obviously Rogue as well, but like Uncia looked like the favorites, honestly, to win the whole thing. And once we won that, once we played Afrika, I think we were pretty confident going into that match, just because we had a harder run through the bracket. But yeah, I never think we were confident in our abilities. I will agree that. But at the same time, especially with the change with Mickie and stuff like that, there was a lot of things that could have changed there. But we weren't cocky. We were confident but not cocky going into that, because we knew how much these Korean teams practice and prep and care, and it was just another level. Luckily, we were still at that level to work on it.
Yeah, like what was the decisions-making process to bring Mickie in? Do you remember?
Yeah, vaguely. It's man, it was a wild thing, because Tailspin was just didn't work out with Tailspin.
Yeah,
and we're like, well, we're basically. I think it was right before playoffs.
Yes.
I think we'd already done group stage. I think it was right before playoffs, and then me, Dennis, because Dennis is basically at that point. I wouldn't necessarily say, because our whole team was kind of their own coaches, right? It was a player-driven team, and I was, I was helping them. I was doing anything I could to help these guys, and like it was to the point where it was just me and the boys in Korea for especially the first season. Like, I was running out there, going to like Lotte Mart and grabbing their groceries and stuff. So I was making sure they were. I think that's where the whole TazMo thing came, which people like to call me.
Right. Yeah.
That's where it came from, because I literally went and got them groceries and stuff, because who else would?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, the coaching side of it, like, Dennis was probably more the leader and the spokesperson for the team if he's talking to me or Mike. And we just talked to him, like, hey, what do you want to do? What's your what's your replacement looking at? And then Dennis was like instantly like, I really like this Mickie guy. I saw him at the World Cup. I met him. He was a really good dude, and he seemed to have like good mechanics. And we're just like, where's he from? He's like, Thailand. And we're like, okay, all right. Well, we're gonna add that to the list, and we were open to it, very open to it. We weren't like, oh, okay, but like, we trusted him. We trusted Dennis. He's got us this far. Why not trust his mind? And he formed an amazing roster of a bunch of people from different countries to win. And I still remember the day that Mickie arrives, and he's just like, he's so different. Oh my gosh, he was so different when I first met. He was so quiet. Yeah. And then like 3 days into the us practicing or something, or like maybe even 2, he just became the Mickie today. He just like instant change as soon as he picked up more English. But yeah, I mean, it was an instant fit pretty much after like the first day. And like Coco, I remember Coco and Mickie talking, and Mickey's English wasn't to that level yet. So Coco and Mickie were like really trying to, like, that's why you saw a lot of the combos back then with the Reinhardt Diva Bomb was a big thing then. And like they were always working it out. And it was a really good fit. And, I think his personality just really meshed with the rest of our group, which was a big reason I think we did well. And also Diva, he was really good at that hero at the time. And Diva was pretty strong back then. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of how it happened. It just kind of came into our laps. Dennis was like, yep, do it. And we're good to go.
Yeah. And I must say, like, there's a picture of INTERNETHULK holding the trophy, and he's sitting in a chair and he's looking at the trophy. I think he's 30 by that time.
Yep.
And just to look at like a feat that nobody else in esports has done before. He had this incredibly hard grind into professional esports. Like, I'm not sure if I'm here if I don't see that picture, because at the time I was also working another job. I'm just thinking, okay, this guy still has as much grind in him, might as well, right? Like, that was an incredibly inspiring moment, I think, for a lot of people in the scene.
I was there for that photo. It was actually in our Envy offices back in Charlotte, in North Carolina, and that was when the Apex trophy that I had to actually travel with, actually, because I ain't packing that thing, right? But it was crazy because people knew what it was.
Is it heavy?
Oh yeah, it's like 35 pounds or something.
Wow.
It's not heavy. Yeah, it's one of our heavier trophies in there. Our actually heaviest trophy, or most ridiculous size one, is the Paladin's trophy. It's
really?
It's huge. I mean, if you ever get a chance to come down, please you'll see some of these trophies. Some of them are insane. But the Apex one actually had a really nice light. And it was a very pretty trophy, different, very unique, very nice. And so I actually carried it with me. Like, I literally put it in the cabin. I was like, I'm not packing this; it'll break or anything. So I made sure we made sure it came through. But yeah, Dennis, I remember taking that photo. He literally asked Corey, our videographer at the time. He's like, "Can you take this photo?" And he was just sitting there at the thing, and he just he's like, "Yeah, I just want to do it like this." I'm looking at it, and I was like, "Yeah, that's it." And it's a very memorable photo. I mean, all the photos with them winning the whole thing was just. I still remember Taimou running down to grab the trophy, and I was like, "Please don't fall, Timo, please," because that thing was slippery. And then I yelled at. Well, I didn't yell. I was like telling the Apex person, I was like, "I'm going there too." So you see me running down there later, and I mean, it was just such an incredible feat. And you know when Monty is praising an NA team, you know it's something special,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, I love Monty, and like we had to really shout out to him for helping us in Korea. He really made us feel welcome. Probably also because we were winning as well. He's like, okay, this is finally the chance. Because but yeah, I think it is still a very incredible feat because you just see how much dedication. Like we got to go. Visit some of the, like, we went to visit the Kongdu bootcamp, or not bootcamp, their office space, and it's just like they're so much more ahead of us than at the time. They had offices that we are in a team house. All these things are so different, and it was super crazy to see. And I'm glad that experience to me is still like top 2 in my esports career for sure.
And then you guys also went back twice more, right?
Yep.
And I think like. Yeah, like, of course you didn't defend your title, but you always held up the flag to a train in Korea that picked up, right? Like, the competition was definitely fierce. If we're looking at the Kongdu Panthera, like season 2, like Epic season 2 roster, basically everyone on that roster is still like incredible. Like, we're talking Void, we're talking Birdring, we're talking Rascal. Like, these guys were just. Like
Luffy, I think, as well.
Luffy, Fissure was on that team.
Yep.
Like, who knows if things go different. Like, that team was just incredibly stacked, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, you still go deep every single time. You come back to North America for a short stint. I think, like, you played, there was, like, North American Contenders Season 0.
Yep.
You didn't just win that. You completely stomped that. Right?
Yep.
So,
and then there's MLG Vegas as well. I think MLG Vegas was the first one we did, and that was actually just after Apex season 3. Literally the same weekend. It was the next weekend, and a crazy story about that one. Taimou had some it was like a visa issue. It wasn't necessarily his visa was bad or anything, but basically sometimes immigration just gets weird. And he was sick at the time, and he comes in, and we finally managed to get him here. And he comes in the day before at 6 a.m. with no sleep, sick, and has a visa, and goes in and beats Complexity, and then I think C9 or Fnatic just dominates them. It's like, that's how strong we were as a team. And then I think, I don't know if it was Contender Season 0 or the MLG Vegas. I think it was MLG Vegas. We played against FaZe for the finals, and we didn't drop a single point. Like, they didn't cap ever. Like, they didn't cap a point in Koth. They didn't win a point there. They didn't cap in 2CP. It was just dominant. And it's like, it was really, I didn't think we were going to go that hard, right, coming off of that first one. So,
right. I mean, like, you compete in Korea, so that's like a handicap. Being there, not having the infrastructure, playing against essentially a wide field. Like, you stomp North America repeatedly. You come into the Overwatch League. You'll even add players that fix some of your weaknesses, and I think you even won both of your preseason matches as well.
Yep.
By all rights, you're thinking we did everything right, correct?
I mean, yeah, I would say so. I mean, by all fairness, and those players that we brought in, with the likes of like Seagull and XQC, some may think, oh, they're all famous, it's just for the content or the hype around them. It's like, no, those are legitimate holes we were trying to fill in our roster. Like, Coco was known for a good Reinhardt, but he was quite a passive player, and his Winston was never that good. And someone like XQC is a very aggressive player, and his Winston at the time was probably one of the best in the West at the time. And he was a very vocal player and whatnot. And then you have someone like Seagull, which we never really properly had a proper flex DPS.
Yeah.
And we're not dumb. We're not going to pretend like, oh, yeah, that also is nice that he comes with all this following and fans. But that wasn't the main reason. Again, it's competitive first. It's just a cherry on top that he came there. And we made a lot of these changes to really shore up our roster. We looked good coming into it. We felt confident. And and then we had that, what was it? The match against Seoul. That was like, again, it's like, I still wonder what would have happened if we won that. It was pretty close. It was a pretty close. I mean, that Junkertown map was so great to watch, and it was so fun just seeing like the two go at it, because it's like the old Lunatic Eye, and they always had our number. Lunatic Eye were probably our biggest kryptonite overall. They always had our number. They would always pull it out against us. But that time, it really looked like we had a chance against them. With our new and improved roster in a sense. With I still remember seeing the roster on paper when we were doing our contenders, and seeing the fact that we had a DPS line of Seagull on Pharah, Taimou was on McCree, and Effect was on Tracer.
Right.
And you go into that like, okay, that's pretty nuts. And so I really did feel like we had all the bases covered. We brought in Kai, who had a lot of experience through Overwatch, was good friends with a lot of the players, kind of understood the game pretty well, with all these things. So I would say we really felt confident going into the season for sure.
So, for those that don't recall, the season doesn't go as planned, right? And you course corrected several times to try to get there, but in the end, you didn't make playoffs. So, in hindsight, what do you think was the problem during season 1?
I mean, I think something that we talked about as well about momentum is a big thing. I think getting kind of almost humbled in a way of just not starting out as hot as we wanted to really kind of hit people's egos, I'm sure. Not to say we were super cocky and we're going to win it all. Like, I pitted us as like a top 3 team. I didn't think we were the best team going into the league. I think Seoul Dynasty looked better than us. I think you could argue NYXL with their roster, because our toughest scrim partner ever in Korea, if I remember right, was the LW Blue roster. That was the one. I think that was the one with the CBLB and those guys, and they were just nuts. Like, they were so good. I think it was like CBLB, Mano, and those guys. So those were the top 3 teams, and I think that was a big kind of tough pill to swallow in a sense. That, and I think the length of the season, how many games, like it's 40 games, and all those games together, kind of, if you're losing a lot, it's hard to get out of it. Like you said before, and I truly believe the momentum really just hurt us a lot, until kind of it was tough, and we really did try and make some changes here and there with adding some other players to try and make this work, but at the end of the day, I just think in hindsight, yeah, sure, maybe we could have made a couple more changes and maybe moved some players around here and there. But you know, I think Envy as a whole has always been someone to like, this team had came in and done so much for us. We're not going to we can't like back down on these guys. We got to believe in them and work with them.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think Haster's always been very strong about. I've always been someone that really wants to give the players the chance to turn it around. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. And this time it just didn't. So it's an unfortunate turn of events, but
Yeah. I'm not sure if you're familiar with there was a team a Russian team in the League of Legends scene called Moscow 5.
Moscow 5. Yep.
And they were a great team in a tournament circuit situation, right? It wasn't really a league. It was more like everything on the line pretty much every game. And the practice schedules and like the bursts of it all were very different. Do you think like that team was maybe like more used to a different era of Overwatch where it wasn't just league play?
Sure. Yeah, I think it was a very different feeling. Like it wasn't so much like a tournament format, and like and that was how esports was for so long. I think the format definitely was different to us, but I mean, at the same time, everybody was kind of coming into the same thing. But I think our team generally just thrived on going to these tournaments, and that camaraderie really helped. Whereas it was just like league match for league match and league match. It was harder for us to really, starting off. Like I said, if we had beaten Seoul Dynasty, I think you could have seen a better result from us. I still think we had some holes here and there in our roster and whatnot, but I don't think we were as bad as we should have been, or like, what I mean? Like we still, like the talent was there, and it's not like we were constantly getting blown out by teams. We were just, I think that's kind of been the history of the fuel. Unfortunately, it's like there will be times, sure, we'd be 3-0'd, but a lot of the times there were some really close matches against some really top caliber teams, and we just being able to pull that out was the big issue, right? Which we were able to do in the past and just didn't happen now. So,
right. I think that the scene is sort of aware of like a story like a player like Snillo, who just appeared and then disappeared into thin air. At least he had a cool story about picking mushrooms and everything.
Yep.
For Chipshajen, I mean, okay, to give a little bit of context, if people haven't watched Overwatch during that time, I think around Apex Season 1, Apex Season 2, you could legitimately argue that not only is Chipshajen as good on Ana as Ru Jae-hong was, you could argue that he's the best player in the world. Just like he wasn't as aggressive as Jae-hong. He was definitely a little bit more of a passive Ana, but everyone seemed to have incredible respect for what kind of performances he was able to deliver for the team. And suddenly, as quickly, or not as quickly, but as impressively as he was, at some point he just said goodbye, and then we never heard of him again.
Mm-hmm.
What's the story of Chipshajen, and are you still in contact with him, or?
So personally, I'm not in contact with him anymore. I'm gonna give him his privacy. I'm not someone to harp on him. I've reached out to him, to talk to him. But me and him, I feel always had quite a positive relationship. I think we talked about his history in other games, and he is a very to himself person. But at the same time, he was kind of like this guy who would be good with anything, kind of thing. He would kind of like shrug and do what he wanted to do. And yeah, his talent was super undervalued. I think some people don't notice how good he was, especially in those Apex seasons. And like even come back to NA, I remember just the sleep darts and stuff that he almost kind of started to be a bit more aggressive, actually, which was quite nice to see. I just think as the season went on, it was more kind of a coaching decision through it. But like it just made more sense for the direction we were trying to go with our, the way we want to play, and bringing in like someone like an Unco just made more sense to us. And that kind of in a sense pushed him out, I guess you could say, not in a negative way, but just like it just made more sense for that. And it seemed like, it just, that was the direction we wanted to do as a coach's decision. And, we had to respect that. And, the results were actually at the time better with Unco, like the way he was playing it. But yeah, like I said, I would have loved to see him more in the league, because I think, yeah, he had such a positive push to he was a really good player, and I think it just like as the league got like more and more intense, things changed, and that was just the direction we went, to be quite honest. But yeah, I have nothing bad to say about Chips. I think he, worked so hard and worked really hard with us, and I wish him nothing for the best. I hope we hear from him soon. I hope he comes back and starts dominating in some game or something. It'd be fun.
Yeah. Now there were a couple of changes across the season, and like I think. One thing is about Coco's playstyle that sort of fell out of meta. We remember the incredible Winston. Like, I remember there was like this talk about how well players used Primal. Like Fissure was mentioned and Gesture, and like Coco was more a Reinhardt player than anything. So you guys needed to bring someone in, right?
Yep.
And as Dallas Fuel, I think you are very competitively minded. You're also brand aware. Like,
sure, yeah, of course.
You brought in Siegel, who was the biggest streamer in Overwatch at the time. I think it's fair to say, based on
at the time,
streaming numbers.
Also. Yep.
XQC wasn't as big as a streamer, but he like was up and coming. Like he had said the phrase "they went to Korea," so like he already was.
He was building up already. He was already getting there. Yeah, but.
So, what was it like with working with XQC at the time?
Honestly, working with Felix, I mean, first off, with signing, like you said, we did need a different style of player. We needed a more mechanically gifted Winston player, and Coco was a very mind game. Like, it's not like he, especially in his Reinhardt play, he was very good at outplaying even aggressive Reins, and he would be able to like we weren't really worried about playing him for Ryan, but making those other changes into Winston, it was very important that we made something else happen. So with XQC, yes, he was kind of popular and growing it, but it really was about like his hero pool and what he would bring to the team. And we really were excited to bring him on because we generally thought that he would be a really good piece to the puzzle to allow us to play more aggressive and do these things. We were basically kind of shoring up, trying to make our team more dive resilient, because before Envy had never been known as a dive team. They were always known as like being able to play like the triple tank metas, all those things. Like probably, it's if it was a bit earlier, I don't know. But for Felix, when we first got him in, we were working with him. I just feel like he could have been a lot more for us. Obviously, I think he could have played a lot more games for us, and I think it could have shown. But I mean, he did have some pop-off moments. I remember when he kind of dominated Fissure. I remember against the Gladiators when he came back and we won that series, I believe. And you definitely saw the talent that he could have had in the Overwatch League. It's just I feel like he was already on that other course of becoming a personality and a streamer, and that was kind of the vision he wanted to do in the long run. And you see him now, and he's ginormous. He's maybe the biggest streamer right now on Twitch or something, or at least one of the top 5. Yeah, which props to him. Congrats on all of that success. But we kind of needed to, regarding the incidents that happened within the league and with us as a brand and representing that, we just don't stand for those sort of things.
Yeah,
and those are the things we had to do. We can't. It was just that's what we had to do. It's a shame that had to happen. Obviously, I would have liked him to be still in the league and doing all the things for the league and for the fuel. But he's doing his thing now, and we're doing our thing. So
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now we're going into stage 4. Like you've suffered, like the just like I think it bears repeating how heavy of a contrast to what you're used to. Like. The first 3 stages was like come off beating everyone. Yes, you didn't necessarily win Apex Season 2 and Season 3. You also sometimes had unlucky brackets going up against Lunatic High, as you mentioned. But like, finally you arrive in stage 4. You have a leadership change there, and it's going upwards. You're positive. Like it's a 6 and 4 stage. You go close with NYXL at the time, I remember.
No, don't remind me. I mean, I love Pine. I've met him, and like he's a good friend of mine. I know Pine and Jonak both had like hero plays. I remember Jonak like sniped Harry with like a Zen orb, and then Pine just hit some crazy shots on Dorado. And I was just like, if that goes the other way, again, like we beat New York who knows how far we could have gone, because they were one of the stronger teams there, and it's yeah, that was tough. But yeah, continue. Sorry.
Yeah, like I think that gave new hope towards like the core of that roster once again functioning, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is this the NV way? Like I feel like if I look at your moves, there's always like you are more willing to give players a second chance to perform than other orgs necessarily doing so. And as in, like, I think if someone underperforms in some other teams, cut at the end of the season very easily.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we even moving towards a direction where it's like, now you have 30-day contracts. Theoretically, you could be done within the month, right?
Yep.
Is that something that just doesn't sit right with the values that your organization has?
I mean, here's the thing. I think I think a big part of it, especially with the Overwatch team, is a lot of those players did, it's like, they're essentially, in a sense, you could argue they were world champions winning the Apex season, right? And coming in and doing so much for the org. We wouldn't have jumped into the Overwatch League, jumping into a franchise spot if we didn't believe in these guys to perform and do well. And like from a content and brands side of it, if we want to talk about that, I mean, I think we were more conscious of that going in after Mickie joined, because of how much traction he got and stuff, and how much of an interesting, we had a very interesting, unique team with all the different personalities we had, right? So, yeah, I think, in hindsight, maybe sticking with some of these players a bit longer than we should have. Yeah, you could argue that, but I think a big philosophy of myself and Mike and Envy as a brand is always just to kind of trust and give these players more chances, because you do have bad years, you do have these. I mean, in traditional sports, you have these things, and fans may be out for blood and all these other things, but sometimes it can be the same way. It's like you drop someone, and then they're like, "Oh, why didn't you? It wasn't all his fault," or something like that. So it can happen both ways, right? But we do truly believe, like, with the addition of Aero and with the way we performed in the playoffs, like narrowly losing to New York, having a positive end to the season, we really thought, like, hey, this be something we can build off of and really kind of move forward for the next season.
Right. How involved? I like, we know that Hasra had a role change. I think sometime last year. Like, how involved was Hastro at the time in building the team, and how involved is he now?
So I would say, I mean, Hastro's always involved with those decisions. He's never not been. That's not like. It's almost like, even with the Call of Duty team at this point, like I've, even though I didn't work with them, I would still talk to them about like the creation of the Empire and stuff. I talked with them. Me and Mike are pretty close, and we've been able to talk about all these constructions of rosters, but at the same time, we do talk to the coaches about these things. It's not like, Mike's calling all the shots or I'm calling all the shots. It's like, it's a group effort, right? We talk, and our biggest thing is trying to get the players we want to try and get, right? And or what the coach would like to try and get, and how we want to do it. And, I think Aaron at the time, I can't speak for him, but I feel like we did feel pretty comfortable coming into the next season with the roster we had. We did know we needed to make some moves, which we tried to do. But, we really did try and, work with that. But Hastro, Mike has always been there to work with, and even now, like with the new construction of the roster for season 4, he was right there working with us and Rush. But at the end of the day, it's the coach who should have that decision.
Yeah, makes sense.
We're just there to facilitate the budget side and make sure if we can do it or not. We're gonna be like, hey, every says this like we have an unlimited supply of money. That is not the case. Like there is some rumors out there that are a bit far fetched and out there. So I will say, like, there is a limit to our spending. We're not like a crazy, like we don't drop the bag on every single person. Blah 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 blah. I mean, look, we treat our players well. I'm not gonna deny that, and I think we can take pride in that. We really try and change players' lives for the better, and really make things good there. And it's important to note that we are, we are very money conscious as well at the same time. Like going into this season, especially, just making sure. But very happy with what we did. So
Right. And chronologically, we'll get to that specific discussion.
Of course.
But like, I want to like, I wonder, like, you were world beaters, of course, Apex Season 2, Apex Season 3. I personally wouldn't have sweated that too much, just because of like, it was a long, fatiguing process as well. Everyone from the Western teams that went over described it as such. So to sort of say like that was your real competitive level in itself is a problematic statement. But also like you didn't perform badly there. So then you drop into the Overwatch League. It sort of rattles you around. And then between Season 1 and Season 2, I mean, there must have been talks about like goal setting, like what do you want to achieve, what is possible with the situation that we have. So do you remember what the off season after Season 1 was like?
I mean, going into, obviously we were pretty bummed of how it all ended out, right? But I was at least happy, but with the end of the season, how we kind of ended it at least in a positive mindset. I mean, going into the next season, we wanted to work off of that, right? We want to make that more of a positive season, like even more, right?
Yeah.
And we weren't going to be like, oh yeah, we're going to win the league next year, we're going to be better, all these things. But you always want to strive for that. If you're not, like, I don't know what you're doing in esports or competitive, but we want to work with the players that we had success in the past with, that seem to have a resurgence with the new coaching staff and everything like that. And we want to try and build around those pieces and then try and build up from there. That was like the understanding. We brought in some players, that we thought would fit and mesh well with the team. Some did, some didn't. And, we always, every season, we're trying to progress with those mindsets in mind.
Right. This ends the first part of our interview with TazMo. In the second and final part, releasing soon, we inch closer to the present and talk about topics like GOATs in Season 2, working around COVID in the third season, Team Envy's Academy roster, the values of giving second chances, how Dallas Fuel landed on signing Rush and his entourage of Element Mystic players, marketing a Korean roster, and expectations coming into the fourth season. If you don't want to miss the juicy second part, or want to watch more interviews like this one releasing in the future, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification. Just stay tuned to GGRecon for all your Overwatch esports and general esports news.